Bienvenidos a todas las personas que nos acompañan de manera
Hello,
virtual.
good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to having Mr. Michele Berni, Mr. Stefano Farnet, and also Mr. Gabriel Martinez and Master Noé Valdivieso. Today, we will begin with the CIESS session, which is the challenges of the demographic revolution, which purpose is to know or to learn more about the documentation and work made by Mr. Berni, which is called the challenges of the long-term pension system. So now I will state certain phrases for the context of the introduction for each of the professors, for Mr. Berni and Mr. Fournet. Many countries in the world are into a demographic process for a demographic revolution. After the demographic regime is where the human beings had lower possibilities to influence or just to cover the natality mortality due to the controlled demographic control, due to the reproduction process, and also a growing capacity to tackle different issues that we actually are facing. So now today's topic that we are going to address make a special reference to the Colombian case. This topic can also be processed or evaluated not only for our reality, but also for the Latin America, that continue working towards the elderly demographic process. And what will be the main objective of this session? First of all, we have a presentation that will be provided by Mr. Fournet, Mr. Berni. So they will be provided 15 minutes for them to make their exposition. And then we will continue with Mr. Martinez and Mr. Valdivieso comments. So they also will have 10 minutes to present their comments. And then we will continue to answer all the questions that the audience may. So please let us know what will be your questions through the chat in the platform, the chat in the platform. And we will be able to answer all this information at the end of the presentation.
la persona que la formula y el
So
país.
first of all, you have to write down your name and your country for the person that is asking this question, and of course, the name of the person you are addressing this question. So will we pass the floor to Mr. Bernie, who is the Doctor of Economics by the University of California, Berkeley, and a BA in the Political Science from the University of Florence. And also, he is a member of the Center for Analysis of Public Policy of the University of Modena and Reggio Emilia, and also member of the Global Labor Organization and non-resident research member of the Center for China and Globalization. And also he has been a member for the University of Shanghai, La Salle Shanghai, and Externado de Colombia. For more than 30 years, he has participated as an expert on labor market and migration issues in numerous projects on the European Union, the ILO, and the IOM. His research is centers or focuses on the development of stock flow models and their application on the analysis for labor markets, education, and migration. So before we can pass the floor to Mr. Bernie, we want to thank your participation on behalf of the Inter-American Center for Social Security Studies and Center. So we are very happy to have the opportunity to share your work with many of the member institutions that belong to the conference. And of course, because we have members from more than 35 countries in America. So I think that this work will be very useful to analyze how many countries are addressing this field. That is why we are talking today about this document. Please go ahead, Mr. Bernie.
I really want to thank CIESS for inviting me here, and especially Professor Carrasco for his very nice words of introduction. I'm especially happy that I can speak about this demographic revolution, which I suppose is a kind of megatrend, which is not receiving, in my opinion, the attention it really deserves. I will try to go over my presentation as fast as possible, because I understand that I have only 15 minutes, so I'm not sure I will be able to go over all of it. Anyhow, we can start with this, and then we see where I get it, and if something is left, I can probably complete it during the question and answer phase. Let's start with some ideas about the demographic revolution, which I suppose is a really basic megatrend. This is affecting our planet since probably about the middle or the second part of the 19th century. Demographers have known about it for a long time, and the discussion has been very, very deep and very careful, especially in the second half of the 20th century. But after this argument has been kind of lost and in my opinion, in the last 25, 30 years, demographic trends have not received the attention they deserve. What is this demographic revolution? Before it was known, has been discussed as a demographic transition. I believe this is not really correct, that we should talk really about a demographic revolution, because it marks the passage from what I consider a natural demographic system to a new one, to a new system in which, to a new regime. In the natural regime, man did not have control over reproduction and over the death. Now the situation has totally changed as a consequence of the revolution in medicine that started in the second half of the 20th century and is still continuing, and which has brought humankind to have an increasing control over death and a total control over reproduction. I suppose that differently what has been sustained for many years, this demographic revolution has not been caused by the industrial revolution, but as I said, by the medical revolution. What is the impact of this revolution? The first and most important impact I think can be visualized in this slide. You see, from the 17th century up to the 20th century, the average rate of growth of population has been kind of constant, around 0.4% per year. Then abruptly something changed. And you can see this is when this demographic revolution starts and brings the rate of growth of population first to 1%, then almost to 3% in the second half of the 20th century, and then something which was kind of unexpected to demographers, something happens. The rate of growth of total population starts declining, and most probably it will become negative. I would say certainly it will become negative, probably in about 50 years. I've not been able to see the last projection published by the United Nations just a few days ago, but I understand that they recognize the fact that the demographic revolution is going much faster than it was thought before. So this is the impact on the population of Earth. This is very important. You can understand from many, many perspectives, environmental perspective, social perspective, labor market perspective. But to fully understand the impact and to correctly analyze demographic evolution, we have to distinguish clearly three phases. One first phase in which, as we have seen, the rate of growth of total population increases at an increasing rate. A second phase in which total population continue to increase, but at decreasing rates. And finally, the unexpected part, or expected by very, very few people, total population starts to decline. I would like to point out that the population of Earth has constantly increased for around 400 years. So if total population will start to decline, as I'm sure it will in about 50 years, we will enter a new period, a new era for humankind. Probably it's not such a bad thing, I would believe. But this we can discuss later. What is the important part? There are two characteristics of this process which we should point out. The first is that the phases of the demographic revolution, which I pointed out for total population, affect also each single age group of the total population, and especially the three main age groups: the young, the working age population, and then the elderly. They go through the same phases in their natural order. First, the young people, then after 15 years, the increasing waves of birth, of baby born, of newborn reach working age population, then after 65 years, they reach the elderly. So this process goes through the total population in about 65, 70 years. The second point, which must be pointed out, must be remembered, is that the almost 190 countries in which the planet is now divided will have entered this process in different moments of time. First, those were first affected by the Industrial Revolution, which created the condition, socioeconomic condition, that their citizens could enjoy the discoveries of the medicine, and then all other countries have followed, depending on the moment in which they reached a given level of modernization. The last ones, the poorest ones, are entering this process only now. Now, if we put together this situation, then we get a very interesting point, which is represented in these slides. As you can see, the planet can be seen as divided, the countries of our planet can be divided in three main groups. In blue are the countries which have entered or are entering the demographic revolution only now. So their population, and especially their working age population, is increasing at increasing rates. Then you have the orange countries. Those are what I would call the postmodern countries. These are the countries in which have already reached the third and last part of the demographic revolution and in which total working age population is declining. Then you have green countries. These countries are those in the middle, those transiting from the first to the third groups. There are very few. They are characterized by, in these countries, labor can be considered a scarce factor as it is assumed by the neoclassical model. What is the problem here? What is the real problem here? Is that we have one group of countries, the postmodern ones, in which working age population is declining. And if working age population is declining, also labor force is declining, and the possibility to cover all the jobs the economy is creating, but also those that are available, is not there anymore. These countries cannot do without immigrants. They cannot do it. No way. No policies can close the gap between labor demand and labor supply. At the same time, in the blue country, the opposite is happening. In these countries, the working age population is increasing so fast, labor supply is increasing so fast, that there is no possibility for these countries to generate a rate of growth sufficient to provide jobs for the supply. So in this situation, I think the only rational behavior would be to organize migration flows in line with the needs of the economy. But let's go back to our point, demography and labor market. The presence of these three stages in the demographic revolution creates three challenges. First, we have an educational challenge. It is in the phase of rejuvenation, in the phase in which the young people are growing at a very fast rate. Then there is a phase in which working age population is increasing at a very fast rate. This creates an employment challenge, an occupational challenge. And finally, there is a phase in which the elderly are growing at a very fast rate. And then we get to the pension and welfare challenge. Now, I will now focus briefly on South America and then on Colombia. I don't know how much we can get in deep with this, but I will just give you the main points. First of all, the pace of the revolution, of the demographic revolution in South America. As you can see, in 1950, the main countries in South America, many, I mean the majority, still had a total fertility rate above 6. The total fertility rate is the average number of children per woman. Only 3 countries were in a different situation: Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay, especially Uruguay. But in 70 years, the situation is totally changed. You can see that many countries are already below 2. A replacement rate, a total fertility rate of 2 is called replacement rate. Is that rate at which population doesn't grow? 2 children per woman means that 1 substitutes the mother, 1 substitutes the father, the population remains stable. The other countries are maximum. We have a Bolivia. Bolivia is 2.6, then Peru 2.2, Paraguay 2.5, but then Uruguay is 1.5, Argentina 1.9, Chile 1.5, Brazil 1.6, Colombia 1.7. In all these countries, the number of births are not sufficient to replace the death. Okay, now let's go to Colombia. I will not go over exactly to all the process. You have the data reported in the paper. Let's give first an idea of the educational challenge. Just to note that in 70 years, the population in the school age population moved in Colombia from 5 to 16 million. And in the school age population, in the compulsory age, from 3 to 7.5 million. This is just give you an idea of the problem Colombia has to face, probably very similar to that of many other South American countries. Did the Colombia was Colombia able to face this challenge? Well, data on labor market, which we have a look later, show that in fact Colombia did, at least from a quantitative point of view. Okay, quality is a different this topic, and probably Stefan could tell you more about that. After the educational challenge, then we get the employment challenge. Here you have give you these two graphs give you an idea, especially the first one, of what happened in Colombia. These are a representation of entries and exit entries into and exit from labor force, from working age population. So you see that there was an explosion in working age population, which, however, is now the working population by now is declining, and it will start. Sorry, the rate of growth is declining, despite the inflow of Venezuelan immigrants, which are shown by the peak reported on the graph, and the working age population will start to decline in Colombia in about 20 years. Right? This is an important change, which will bring Colombia from the green to the orange group. Was Colombia able to face this? Yes, it was. I will just go very fast on this because we have no time, then we can go back to this. Colombia in this period had a rate of growth of employment larger than that of working age population, implied an increase in the rate of employment. The increase in labor force was lower than that in employment, so that unemployment declined. I will not over the numbers because we don't have time. We can do that later. It is important to observe that in these 20 years, the labor market in Colombia was characterized by three main trends. First, a tertiarization. The percentage of people working in the service sector reached almost 2/3. The second, a strong increase in the educational level of the employed. And third, a notable increase in the presence of women. Generally, these three elements are connected: tertiarization, education, feminization. They generally go together, and Colombia experienced all three of them, as we should have expected. Very fast. What will happen in the future? Well, you can see that if we compare the past 20 years with the next 20 years, very strong changes will take place. In the first place, we can see that the decline in young people will become will become more and more pronounced, that the increase in working age population will become, on the contrary, will decline, while the number of elderly people will increase much faster. What does this mean in economic terms? To analyze this thing, just to get a general idea of this phenomenon, I have built some scenarios. I will just tell you what happens in what I call a business as usual scenario. If you take a trend situation in which the rate of growth of employment would be half of that in the last 22 years, which saw not such a big rate, well, we can see that this, and we make realistic assumption about the rate of activity, we can see that, in fact, Colombia can face the situation. It will probably, a situation like this, improve the unemployment situation. Probably Colombia will start needing immigrants, but this is a more complicated issue. But it is more possible that in 10, 12 years, Colombia will reverse the trend in migration that has been negative up to now, with the exception of the Venezuelan immigrants, and have, on the contrary, need of foreign labor. So this is the situation. How also can we evaluate this? Probably Stefano can be more clear on this, but we have used an economic index of dependency, which differs from the demographic index of dependency because it uses employment as denominator and not working age population. In this case, we can see that the number of people 1,000 workers will have to sustain declines from 1,300 to 1,060. And that the number of people, pensioners, to be sustained remain kind of modest, about 175. So it seems very simple solution, not too problematic. I have comparison, which we'll probably go over later on with other G7 countries. Just to point out the real problem is a different one. That in Colombia, almost 60% of the people employed are informal, which means they don't pay, they do not pay, they do not contribute to the pension system. In this case, if only 40% contribute to the system, then some problem exists. But this is, I leave this discussion to Stefano. And then if you need more information, specific information on labor market and demography, we can go over it later on. Thank you very much for listening.
Muchas gracias al profesor Bruni.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruni. So let's continue with Professor Forné. Mr. Forné is economist from the Bologna University, and he also has an economics degree from the University of London in Los Andes. University professor and author of several publications on the labor market and pensions. He has been an advisor to the Ministry of Labor and the Economic and Competitiveness Department of the Presidency of the Republic of Colombia. He has served as a consultant to the International Labor Organization, ILO, in the Inter-American Center for the Development of Knowledge in Vocational Training, the Program for the Promotion of the Youth Employment, and also for the Inter-American Development Bank, the United Nations Development Program, and the Economic Commission for the Latin America and the Caribbean. He is a columnist for the Colombian newspapers El Tiempo and Portafolio. Since 1999, he has served as director of the Labor Market and Social Security Observatory of the Externado de Colombia University. Professor Forné, thank you very much. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. So I will be passing the floor for you so you can continue with your presentation. Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for your invitation and for the opportunity that you are providing us to both Michele and me to introduce you our documentation and our work. So I will share my screen with you now.
No tenemos problema, todo se ve bien.
Okay, so please just let me know if you can see the screen now.
Voy a empezar con retomar los...
So I will get started just to resume the ideas of the demographic revolution that Mr. Michele exposed. So I will just talk in short to recall you. So we have nominated the demographic revolution is an interpretation of labor perspective, which is called or which is known as demographic transition. So we have already called about this. Now, the demographic revolution, or depending on the evolution of birth and mortality rate, we can define it as three stages of the demographic revolution in which the total population grows at increasing rates, as Michele mentioned. So this means that the proportion or the rate of the young population increases. Then we have the total population, which it goes at decreasing rates. And actually, here we can find that the active population increases. And then the third stage or phase is where the total population declines. And then of course, we have greater or the elderly people increases. So we have here the three stages or phases that also can have three challenges of a country. In the first phase, it is essential to provide education to a growing number of children and adolescents, which is called the educational challenge. Then we will try to find work for an ever-increasing labor supply, which is called the occupational challenge. And finally, we are interested on the conditions of the elderly for whom it is necessary to prepare an economic and social system because they don't have the conditions to support, just to provide with themselves. And we can call them the pension challenge.
Una cosa che mi parece es importante tener en
I think
cuenta.
that we should consider.
Michele le ha hablado un
Yeah,
poco
actually,
del
I have
desafío
talked
que
with
tenemos
Michele about the occupational or the challenge, occupational challenge that we are recently facing. So now I will talk about the pension challenge.
Quisiera que tuviéramos claro que durante esta
I would
fase,
like
es
to
decir, la
mention
tercera,
that during
la
this
fase
last
excepcional,
phase or the last stage in which the pension challenge occur, we can just show a significant amount of the labor. Because of course, this may arise significant consequences on the management on the pension challenge. Now, I will go ahead and continue with the pension system in Colombia. And of course, as you may know, the Colombian government has started the pension reform. We have already mentioned this, we have talked about this later from many years. And the last governments have talked about the pension government. However, any of them have mentioned about this. However, this government has processed this now. So I would like to recall what was the system that started from 1993. That was a medal of average premium distribution system versus individual savings that was administered by private entities in Colombia, which are, I call the pension fund systems. And this system worked only in Peru and Colombia. Because the people can either choose the contribution or the individual saving system, so they can be able to transfer to another system along or where they are living. Now, this pension system wanted to reform or just to update because, of course, they faced a lot of problems. However, I would like to recall the main challenges. So they have to face the lower coverage for any of the schemes. So approximately the 40% of Colombian people contribute to pensions, and around the 30% of the elderly people have a pension. Now, the second problem is a non-sustainability, the sustainability or the weakened financial sustainability of the public system, because they should have been supported by the national budget, because the budget didn't correspond to the pension payment. However, according to the private agreements, they had a social sustainability because pensions that they were paying are very low. Now, with the reform, we have maintained both systems. So, however, we have two pillars. So in the first pillar, we have the distribution system in which everyone should contribute. So if we have a higher income, the people can contribute to the distribution scheme. And with a lower budget, they have to contribute with the excellence in the education system.
Tanto antes de la reforma como ahora,
So before the reform and nowadays, we can see that the distribution scheme is an important element for the pension
ten en
system.
cuenta que prácticamente antes podían escoger, pero ahora todo
So
mundo
as you may know, you
en
previously were able to choose, however, everyone is within a distribution scheme,
de ingreso.
depending on the level of their distribution or
Entonces
contribution
surge,
income.
La discusión acerca de cómo financiamos este sistema
So
de
now,
reparto.
how
Crear
can
un
we
programa
finance or can we
de
just manage
reforma,
this
pero sigue
system
siendo
according to the
incluyente.
reform? Of course,
Ahora,
this is still
yo
is
quisiera
a
resaltar una
problem with the
que,
reform. However, I would like to
por lo menos en
mention
Colombia, la
that
discusión sobre el sistema pensional
the pension
se
system in
fundamenta
Colombia
estrictamente en el análisis del
maintained on the analysis not only for the demographic elderly system that measured the financial sustainability for the distribution scheme.
Cuando hemos hablado del
So when we talked about
se
the
hablaba
aging,
del
we
envejecimiento
used to talk
demográfico,
about the demographic
prácticamente lo
aging.
único que se decía era que
So actually, we
esto
only
haría
mentioned that
viable el sistema de reparto porque
they supported the distribution scheme because in the future we have to support the pensions with a greater number of young people.
Yo creo que a esto hay que hacer
I think
tres observaciones. ¿sí?
that we need to make three
La
observations
primera
on
es que
this.
el envejecimiento poblacional
The first
no
one is
solo
that
implica que habrá
population aging
proporcionalmente más adultos mayores,
does not only
sino
imply
que
that there will
ellos
be more
vivirán
elderly,
más tiempo y en
but that they are
mejores
going
condiciones,
to live
en
more and
mejores
in better
condiciones
conditions, and physical
La otra
conditions.
es que quien trabajamos pensiones
The
lo
second
tenemos
is
más o
that
menos claro, pero en la discusión,
worked
por
in
lo menos en
pensions
Colombia, el
has
sistema de
it clear,
capitalización o de ahorro individual
but
no
the
venía tocado por
individual
el
capitalization
tema del
system
envejecimiento, cuando al contrario
was
sabemos
not,
muy bien
the
que
issue of
esto
aging was not
también no es
addressed.
inmune al impacto del envejecimiento
And this is not
demográfico.
immune
Lo que pasa
to
es
the
que
impact of demographic
régimen
aging,
individual se ajusta
but
automáticamente
individual regimen
reconociendo
adjust
pensiones
automatically,
más bajas.
acknowledging
Hay
lower
toda una
pensions.
literatura sobre esto, yo no voy a hablar
There
de
is
esto.
a lot of
Y lo
textbooks
último
and documents
es,
on this.
como ya anticipó Michele, es que cuando se habla de envejecimiento
And as Michele
demográfico,
mentioned,
se hace
when talking
referencia
about
a los
demographic
jóvenes
aging,
por lo general. Y nosotros,
usually
es
there's a
decir,
distinction
a la
between
población en edad de trabajar.
the young population, the
Nosotros
one that
pensamos
works.
que la óptica más bien debe ser
We think that the
focalizada
approach
sobre los
should be
ocupados,
focused
que son los ocupados
on
los
the
que
ones that
producen
are
riqueza
employed, because those are the
y
ones that
al final
create wealth.
van a mantener las personas
And that
que
in the
ya
end
no
they are going to be
nosotros hemos revisado un
supporting
poco
the
la
people who can no
literatura
longer
y
work.
por lo
Now,
general no hay un
following the
enfoque que se
available
dirija
information, there is not a particular
hacia los
approach that
ocupados. Ya
addresses
hay algunos
the
trabajos, entre otros
people
por
who
ejemplo,
work.
recientes de CEPAL, ¿sí? Que propone tener en cuenta la fuerza de trabajo, pero en la fuerza de trabajo hay también los desocupados que más bien no producen.
Suggest to pay
Deben
attention
ser
to the ones
sostenidos,
that work,
que,
that they, not the
por
ones that
los
work, but the
que
ones that
trabajan.
need to be
Entonces,
supported by
dentro de
those
los
who are
índices de
working.
dependencias clásicos, llamámoslo demográfico,
So,
tenían en cuenta la
regarding
población
demographic
adulta mayor
tendencies, considering the
como,
elderly,
como porcentaje o como proporción de la población en edad de
it's a
trabajar,
percentage
aquí
with
nosotros le
the
proponemos un índice de dependencia
population
económica
in working
que
age is
son, que es la misma
there's an
población
index
adulta mayor, pero
that it's
que
the
no
same
está
elderly
ocupada,
population that is not working
referenciada al número de ocupados.
confronted to the ones that work.
Este mismo índice se puede
This
calcular
index
para toda la
can be
población
estimated
dependiente y para grupos
for
de
all the
población
dependent
dependiente. Aquí te voy
population.
mostrando el índice económico de dependencia,
Here
es
there
decir,
is the
no el
economical
demográfico, el que tiene en cuenta
index on
los
dependency,
ocupados, desde el
considering
2001 hasta
the
el
employed
2023.
from
Esto
2001 to
presenta una
2023.
clara tendencia a la baja.
This shows a clear
interrumpida,
tendency to a decrease,
claramente a raíz de la
clearly
crisis
interrupted
del COVID-19.
due to
Y la razón, pues,
COVID-19.
fundamental de esto es que
The main reason for this
los
being
ocupados han crecido en el
that
país más que
the
la
working population, the
fuera de
employed,
más
have
específicamente,
increased.
aquí hemos calculado los índices de
Basically, here we
tendencia,
have
económica
estimated
por grupos económicos. Aquí tenemos como
economic indexes on
limitaciones,
dependency,
de disponibilidad de series
for example,
estadísticas, pero pueden
availability.
ver que en 2013
In 2013, we
primero,
can see
los
that
grupos
first,
que dependen de los ocupados
the
serán
groups
los
that depend
jóvenes,
on those who work
los
are the
desocupados, la fuerza de
young,
trabajo,
the
es decir, los
unemployed,
inactivos en edad,
labor force,
de
the
trabajo,
ones
y la
that are
población
in working age,
de mayor edad no ocupada.
and the
El total de
elderly
esto
who don't have a
subió
job.
en 2013 1.339, en 2023
It's 1,339.
1.296, es decir, en el
In
tiempo ha
2023,
bajado. Consideramos
1,296. It has gone
cómo
down.
contribuye cada grupo de personas que deben ser
And
mantenidas.
how each group that
Las
contributes that need to
poblaciones son
be
el grupo
supported.
que menos
As we
pesa,
can see, the elderly
claramente
are
van
the
bajando, ¿sí? Hemos pasado de 65
smallest
adultos
group.
mayores que deberían ser
We have gone from
sostenidos por
65
1000 ocupados
that
a
should be
101.
supported by
Ahora, esto parece ser muy
1,339 to
bueno.
101.
El
This
problema
appears to be
es
good,
que en
but the
Colombia,
issue here
en
is
Colombia, tenemos
in Colombia at
un
least, but not only
problema de
here.
la informalidad. Entonces, si
But the
nosotros
problem is
recalculamos
informality.
en el caso
So
del
if we
2023 estos
make another
índices se
estimate in
modificaran
2023,
si consideramos que
they trigger,
solamente más o menos
if
la
we
mitad de
consider
las personas están cotizando al sistema
that only
pensional.
half are contributing
Sí,
to a
esto de
pension
verdad es
system.
un grave problema
And this is a
para
very
la
serious
sostenibilidad
problem
del sistema pensional.
for pension system sustainability.
Terminando con algunas sugerencias para o
I would like
opciones de
to end this with
política
some
para
suggestions
poder
of changing policies
financiar
so we can finance
los regímenes de reparto o de prima media, ¿sí?
the
Si
distribution or
nosotros nos
medium
reconducimos a una
premium
simple
systems.
ecuación, podemos
We
decir que la pensión
solve a simple
promedio
equation. The average
se deriva
pension
de esta fórmula que sigue, es decir,
derives
los
from this
ocupados
formula
dividido lo
from
retirado
the
multiplicado por
employed
el salario
divided
de los ocupados por
in
la
the
tasa
retired
de cotización.
by those who
Es
work,
que
and then
esto se
the
puede transformar
contribution rate. And this can go turn into an
de los adultos
economic
mayores,
dependency
ahí
index
como,
of the
como se
elderly,
plantea.
as you can
Entonces,
see.
fundamentalmente, hay dos medidas
So
gruesas
basically,
que
there are
podrían
two ways
facilitar
to measure this.
La sostenibilidad financiera de un sistema de reparto.
That could make easier a distribution system.
Una es reducir el número
One is
de
to reduce
pensionados, ¿sí?
the number of
Fundamentalmente actuando sobre la edad de
pensioned
jubilación
people
o sobre las normas que
regarding the
determinan
age of
quién tiene
retirement
derecho a la pensión. Y
or
la
the
otra
rules
es
to
aumentar el
determine
número de
who has the right to
contribuyentes,
pension. And the other one
haciendo
is to
que,
control the number
que haya
of
más gente
contributors,
formalizada, o
making
en todo caso aumentando los niveles de
the
empleo,
number of
sabiendo además que
formality to rise.
en algunas ocasiones, muy probablemente,
Knowing that
se necesitará
oftentimes
recurrir a flujos migratorios. Yo quiero
the need of
ampliar un poco
migration
estos
flow will
dos
be a
grupos
necessity.
de medidas, ¿sí? Y entonces retomar,
Now, this
reducir el número
measure
de
could be
pensionados,
to
pues
reduce
habrá
the
que
number
aumentar la
of
edad de jubilación
pensioned people to increase the age of retirement, to increase the number of contribution weeks, and to avoid some of the employed to retire without having all the requirements to be an affiliate in the pension system. In Colombia, there are very significant exceptions, and they do not turn down the exceptions that were written before. Even with the current pension reform, women who have 3 children could retire with only 850 weeks, with all 16 years of contributions. And by the time they retire, they would have a life expectancy of over 30 years. There's no relation in that. There have also been introduced to reduce the age for the Afro descendants and the people who work in the fields, and make it possible for these people to retire in more favorable conditions.
Y bueno, hay otros casos, aquí no se lo recuerdo todo, pero
There are
un
other
punto muy
cases,
importante es que
but
también debemos pensar de
something
eliminar la
important
vida laboral de los adultos mayores.
is to consider
Es decir,
to
debemos pensar de eliminar los desincentivos
amplify the working
al
life,
trabajo, o
to
aumentar
have an incentive
los
for work,
incentivos para que las personas después de la edad de jubilación sigan.
so that people after retirement, they continue working.
Yo quiero resaltar con respecto a este último punto,
I would like to highlight about this last point,
extender la vida laboral de los adultos mayores no
that
va a ser
amplifying the working
solamente
life
para
of the elderly is not only going to be necessary for sustainability of the
del
system
sistema pensional, sino puede ser una
pensions,
necesidad
but it's also going to
derivada
be a
de la
necessity, a derived
preferencia
necessity
de las condiciones del mercado de trabajo.
regarding the work market
eh,
conditions.
Es decir, si dado que la población va, va a crecer, va a
Given that the
disminuir,
population
luego
is
también la
going to
población
decrease
en edad de trabajar va a disminuir.
and the
Lo que vamos a
population in working
enfrentar
age is going
será
to
que en
decrease.
algunas
The
ocupaciones
challenge we are
o
going to
algunas
face is that
actividades
in
deberemos
certain
tener,
activities or occupations,
vamos a experimentar escasez de mano de obra.
we are going to face scarcity in work labor.
Este problema en países que son ya mucho más
How
maduros
has this been
demográficamente.
approached with
El caso
in other
de
countries?
Europa, ¿sí?
For example, Europe.
Europa, hay países que solamente por
In
los
the case of
movimientos
Europe, there are
naturales ya
countries
hubieran
that just
bajado
due
el
to
tamaño de sus
natural
poblaciones.
events, their
Lo que
population
hicieron
would have
fue,
decreased. But what they did
abrir a la inmigración.
was
Esto ha
to
tenido
be
un
open to
dúplice efecto. Por un
migration.
lado, ha disminuido la escasez de mano de
On
obra
one
en el
side,
mercado de
the
trabajo,
work labor
y por el otro,
scarcity
ha
has decreased.
permitido
And on the other hand,
sostener mejor el sistema pensional. ¿Sí?
it has allowed to maintain
Tal
better
vez el
pension
ejemplo
systems.
clásico en
Maybe the
Europa
typical
es
example
España, que
is Spain,
en 9 años ha recibido
that in 9 years
4.400.000
they have
inmigrantes.
received
Pero hay
4,400,000
países que no han sido tan abiertos
immigrants. But there are
a-
countries that have
a
not been this
a
open
la inmigración.
to
Esto,
immigration.
por ejemplo, ha sido Japón.
For example, Japan.
Japón entonces ha adoptado otra estrategia.
Japan has adopted a
Ha
different
empezado a
strategy.
introducir robots que
They have
sustituyen
introduced robots
personas humanas. Y
that
por el otro,
take the place of
es un
humans.
país donde ha aumentado sustancialmente la
It's a country
participación en el
that
mercado de
has
trabajo
increased
de los
considerably the
adultos
participation of
mayores.
the elderly within the workforce.
Japón es el país que tiene la más alta tasa de participación en
Japan is the country
en
with
el
the
mundo.
highest
Es un
rate
país
of
con un
participation.
muy rápido y es un país
They're
muy
a
cerrado, que se ha mantenido relativamente
country that
cerrado
ages
a
rapidly, and they
a las
have
inmigraciones. Yo
kept
sí
close to migration.
quiero prácticamente terminar con unas anécdotas
I'd like to
que
finish
me
this with
gusta
an
mucho
anecdote
recordar, y es un programa de la Deutsche Welle que,
It's a
que se titula
show of the Deutsche Welle
Japón,
that is
pensión,
called
no, mejor un trabajo. Y es precisamente la historia de lo que yo le
Japan,
estaba comentando, es
Better
decir,
Work, and it's
que
what I was just
hay
mentioning.
pocos jóvenes, hay una
That there are
restricción por el lado de
few
la mano de
young,
obra, y esto se
there's a
centra
restriction
en
in
la
workforce, in work labor,
la historia se centra en
and the story
personas
focuses
adultas mayores
in
que
the
hacen un
elderly,
curso de formación
who they
para
go
ser
to a training
jardineros.
program to become
Claramente,
gardeners.
ninguna de las que atendían el curso eran
Clearly,
jardineros antes. ¿Sí?
the people who went to this course were
el
not
alumno más
gardeners
joven
before this. And the
tenía
youngest
61
student
años,
was
mientras el
61 years
alumno
old,
de mayor edad tenía 78.
and the
Pero
oldest
lo
was
más
78.
llamativo era el
But
instructor.
what really drew the eye was the teacher.
Tenía 81 años.
The teacher was
De manera
81 years old.
Extender la vida laboral muy
So,
probablemente será una necesidad,
amplifying
será
work life, it's going to
algo a lo
become
cual
a
nos debemos
necessity.
acostumbrar. Además, muy
And we will
probablemente
have to
esto
get used to
responderá a
it.
las preferencias de las personas que
And this will
querrán
also
mantenerse
address depending on the
activas
preferences of
aún en
people
edad
who
avanzada.
want to remain
No
active
solamente
even in old
será una
age.
necesidad para
And it's not only
poder
going to be a necessity,
balancear financieramente un
it's
sistema
also going to be a need to balance
de reparto.
a
Entre la
distribution
segunda
system.
medida, es decir, aumentar el número de aportantes, pues
Second measure is to
fundamental es
increase the
formalizar el
number
empleo.
of contributors,
Este es un
is
problema muy
to
grave en toda
formalize
América
employment,
Latina.
which in
Hace
Latin America
años
is a
tratamos
great
de
problem.
formalizar la informalidad, pero esto no se
We've been talking
resuelve de un día
years
para
now
otro.
for
Hay que
formalizing
insistir,
the informality,
pero
but it does not
hay
happen
un
overnight.
campo enorme para la financiación
There
de la
is
seguridad social. Así
a
como es
open field
enorme
there to
la
really subsidize
que podemos ganar con una
pension
mayor
systems.
participación de la mujer en el mercado de trabajo.
Also
Y
to
en
increase
general,
the involvement of
no
women
solamente
in
aumentar la
work
participación de las
in the
mujeres,
workforce.
sino aumentar las
And not
tasas de
only this,
ocupación de la
but to
población en edad
increase
activa, ¿sí?
the
Fíjense que,
occupation
por
rates
ejemplo,
in the
en Colombia,
population who are
la
in
tasa de
active age.
ocupación
In Colombia,
es del más o menos
the
del 57%,
occupational rate is around
pero en Estados Unidos es
57%,
del 67%,
but in the
y en
United States it's
Alemania
around
es del
67%,
77%.
and in Germany around
De manera que
27%.
ahí tenemos, si se acuerdan, lo importante para
So if
mantener un sistema de
you recall,
pensiones es el número de ocupados. Tener
that
un
is
margen para mejorar
important to
muy
keep
amplio
pension
también
system
bajo el punto de
to
vista
increase the number of
de una mayor
the employed,
tasa de ocupación. Y bueno,
so to
aquí
increase the occupational
hay que
rate.
evaluar la posibilidad de facilitar la inmigración.
And
En
also
Colombia
to
ha sido, por ejemplo, el país que
encourage
más venezolanos ha
immigration.
recibido, pero
Colombia has received the most
esto
number of people who come from Venezuela.
ha tenido efectos positivos sobre la economía colombiana.
And it has had an impact
Pero
on
al
the
ritmo
Colombian
al cual
economy.
vamos, que las últimas estadísticas sobre
But the challenge
nacimiento
we're
nos dan
facing
entre
is
los
that the
países
last
donde más ha
birth
bajado la
rate,
tasa de
that
fecundidad a nivel mundial.
the
En
countries
estas
where
últimas estadísticas
fertility
tenemos una tasa de
has
fecundidad del 1.2, que es
decreased is
exactamente la de
1.2.
Japón.
That is exactly the rate that Japan has.
El envejecimiento demográfico en Colombia se está dando a pasos
So
muy
in
acelerados,
Colombia,
así como se está dando en
demographic
otros
aging
países.
is
De manera que
really
habrá
taking
que ver si
leaps.
es que vale la pena también
We're
proceder
going to
a facilitar la inmigración.
need
Y por
to
último,
consider
algunas medidas
to encourage
que
immigration.
son,
Lastly,
que son
other
evidentes en la
measures
fórmula, así que esto sí
that are very obvious in the formula.
siempre hacen parte de las fórmulas cuando se habla de sistemas
And this is
pensionales,
always
pues,
whenever we are talking about
aumentar la
pension systems
productividad de la
to
economía, lo
increase
cual
productivity,
permitiría
which would allow
salarios reales más altos.
real wages
Por otro
to
lado,
go
podría
higher,
también aumentar la tasa de
and also
contribución. Por
the
último,
contribution
hay
rates would go up.
una medida que puede sembrar
Another measure that
controversial
may be a little
reducir
controversial
las pensiones.
is
Claramente
to
reducir las
reduce
pensiones,
pensions.
no en términos nominales, sino en términos reales, y solamente las
But-
pensiones más
No,
altas.
but in real
Esto en
terms,
principio en Colombia no es posible por
in
ley,
Colombia it's not
pero hay muchos
possible
países,
by
sobre
law,
todo europeos,
but there are countries,
donde
particularly European,
la indexación de las pensiones
where the indexation of
es completa.
pensions
La indexación por aumento del costo de
is
vida,
whole
es completa.
because
Incluso
of
las
the
pensiones más
rise
bajas
of
no
cost of
entran,
life.
es solamente
The
parte de la
pension is
mitad
lower.
de las pensiones más altas. Uno de esos países es
One of those
Italia.
countries is Italy.
De manera que es una medida que sí se utiliza en el mundo. Y
It's
en
a
el caso
measure
de
that
Colombia,
is
pues,
used in
habría
the
otras
world.
medidas de tomar en consideración.
In
Yo
Colombia,
aquí
we
no
would have to take
quiero,
into
quiero extenderme, pero, por
different
ejemplo,
things.
Colombia es el país que tiene
For
las
example,
pensiones de sobreviviente
Colombia
equivalente al
has
100%
survivors
de
pension
las
that equal the 100%
la tasa de reemplazo es del 100%,
the replacement rate.
que es definitivamente muy alto
That is
comparado con
very high
los demás países del mundo.
compared
A
to
veces
other countries in the
algunos
world.
países se alcanza el 100%, pero
Sometimes other countries
no
may reach this
automáticamente, sino
100%,
dependiendo
but
de
it's
las
not
condiciones
automatic,
económicas
but it
de los
depends on the
sobrevivientes,
economical conditions of the
Eso
survivors.
era lo que quería comentarle.
That's what I wanted to mention.
La opinión es que la sostenibilidad financiera de los
Financial
sistemas de
sustainability
reparto
of
no es que no se
distribution
pueda
systems
alcanzar,
is not that it's
sí
not
se puede
unattainable.
alcanzar,
It is.
tiene una gran desventaja con
It has
respecto
great
a los sistemas de
disadvantages
ahorro individual, que los sistemas de ahorro individual, los de
to compare
capitalización,
to
el
individual
ajuste es automático.
savings
Ahí
systems,
no hay
where
que
the
hacer
adjustment is
nada,
automatic.
pero
Nothing
el
has to
ajuste
be
se
done
limita a
there,
las de pensiones más bajas.
but the adjustment should be
Los
with
sistemas de
lower
reparto, si
pensions
queremos
and
mantenerlos,
distribution
y hay
systems. If we
razones
can
para
to
mantenerlos,
be kept,
pues debemos estar abiertos a
we need to be open
modificarlos todas las veces que sean
to
necesarios.
modify
Y con eso
it's
termino.
necessary.
Muchas gracias.
That I am closing up with that. Thank
Muchas
you very
gracias,
much.
profesor Farni. Antes
Thank you
de
very
cederle
much,
la
Professor
palabra a
Farney.
nuestros comentaristas, yo quisiera hacer
And
como
before we move on to our
reflexiones,
commentators,
teniendo
I
que
would like
nuestro
to
auditorio pues,
mention a
tiene
couple of
países
things,
de toda la América o hacia adentro
considering
de
that in
América,
our countries there are
y que muy
countries
probablemente
from
el
Latin
ejercicio que han
America.
presentado los profesores Bruni y
I'm very
Farnier,
likely what
pues uno se sitúa
Professor
o
Bruni and
sitúa
Farney
a su
have
país en qué etapa se
presented.
encuentra, pues empiezan a
They talk
aparecer
about the phase where
luces
their countries
frente a las
are.
políticas que se requerirían
And you
adoptar
can
por
see in the
cada
policies
país para enfrentar los retos
that need to approach the
de
different countries to
cada
face the
etapa que nos han
challenges
señalado, la etapa creciente, la etapa decreciente,
which
y
that have presented the
cuando
phase of
efectivamente
increase
empieza
and
a
decrease.
disminuir la población.
And
Creo que también
now
es
that the
importante
population
resaltar el
starts
planteamiento teórico
lowering.
en términos de los índices de dependencia,
Now,
donde hacen una
regarding
reflexión
the
que
dependency
los índices de
indexes,
dependencia, una cosa
they
es la
make
dependencia
us
demográfica, donde el planteamiento
take a
se
look
calcula sobre la población en
estimating of the population in working age
se calcula sobre la población ocupada, lo cual, a mi
that
juicio,
is estimated with the
en la medida en que
population who is working and who is employed.
tenemos personas desempleadas, tenemos
We have the unemployed who are not active, and also we have elderly who are dependent. Professor Farnay has brought up different examples that can show the tendencies and the way the countries solve them. I think for the countries in America, once we trace where we are, we can look for new formulas of what is happening and what will become of us, of what we can see is happening. I remind all of you, you can ask your questions on the chat. And let's move on to our commentators. First, let's move on to Gabriel Martinez. He was part of the Economic Regulation Unit and participated in negotiation sessions of the Free Trade Agreement, mainly on investment and competition of policy issues, also thanks to the proposal of the Mexican Social Security Institute. He acted as General Secretary of the Inter-American Conference of Social Security. Currently, he is professor and director of the Master's Degree in Public Policy at the Autonomous Technological Institute of Mexico. He is an expert in industrial organization and regulation as well as social protection issues. We thank your participation in this event. Please go ahead. Thank you for the invitation to take part in this webinar. The article gives us some valuable information. I think it establishes clearly the problems of these pension systems in Colombia. They talked that about 57% of the employed, those with lower education levels goes to 80%. Colombia is a relatively young country. It's critical in the short term, but that will change. They also talk about migration, positive changes. And in the end, we heard that one is to decrease the number of pensioners and possibly increasing employment. Colombia has had some successful reform with particular regimens, reduction of occupational risk or retirement funds. We also heard a complicated system talking about Peru and Colombia that had the same situation where you could use and change of medium and distribution or minimal contribution. This little chart is how I understand the reform of 2025 are the pillars. Solidarity, one semi-contributive, one contributive, one of individual savings, and then one that introduces the invalidity pension for old age. This can cross between medium premium. Apparently, this is already solved. But this is the contributive and semi-contributive system issue. I don't understand why this had to be introduced. Also, the invalidity due to old age goes against the recommendations that had been done. There are some charts. We're not going to be able to see all of them. This is before the reform. Some of the comments done by the lecturers done in 2023 in non-contributive pensions. The first pillar, which is going to be the solidarity. Colombia has the lowest pensions, but the contributive of first level also has the highest. This is the group of the countries. There are ones that are very high, like the one from Chile. I singled out where Colombia stands. Is a really low age for retirement age. Take a look at Denmark at the age of 74 in Denmark, or Italy at 71. So there's clearly a tendency of raising the retirement age. The net rates age, as it is in the chart. There's not going to be enough time to see all of them, but this chart is from the regulatory institution for pension systems. As you can see, Colombia is the only one that goes down, part because a lot of people were not included. This is in 2003, 2016. Colombia is a country where the individual savings retirement went lower. A 60% level is excellent. Mexico hasn't done that well either. It's stable. There are some successful cases. There's also Uruguay, the Dominican Republic. But something happened in Colombia that did not work. And the last one that I have, this is from Argentina. You can notice the low rate of contribution, 1996 to 2016. Take a look at Argentina, that is probably one of the richest countries in Latin America. The density is 33%. For young people, households of 28%.
No te quieres mover para
Less than 70%. You keep this low contribution rates and retirement age really low. And you attack formality in the workforce. The professional system in Argentina crisis is really severe because they nationalized the pension system. It was going to be solidarity, but it went down. There are different causes for this. People need to know that you need to contribute and work. But the pension system, to move on between the solidarity and distribution, that need to contribute, and for that to be flexibility, this is not being achieved. And last year's what has happened in Latin America, also the reform in Uruguay, is a good example. Chile has been going on longer. Along decades, they have moved along on that. What we have seen in North America, Asia, Europe, It's not that you have a distribution and one from individual savings. But it's a point that really caught my eye. Besides, the structure is going to take some time to improve. Before the Colombian reform goes in this, there should be checked because there is a tax that the salaries there are going to be to some tax, and people above that they're going to have a contribution, and they're not going to go to their individual savings. They are going to go to the public pension fund, and they are not going to receive something competitive. So, because for people, individual saving is really, really expensive. People who have salaries medium and high, usually women who have children and they need to work. Also, family men who work and have full-time jobs. Medium class and lower medium class in Latin America, there is no help for them to have an increase in contribution to Social Security. Particularly when we have a situation of informality. So I don't know what they're going to do to have maybe an emergency decree or something, but to increase that on working people is an extra pressure. The recommendations of Bruni Farney are really good. They are really clear. To increase the number of contributors, to increase, and it's going to be hard. Yes, it's going to be hard, and it's going to take time. But those are things that need to be worked on. Taxes, little by little, you are going to have results.
Muchas gracias, doctor Martínez. Me parece que se ha centrado en temas cruciales y además.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martinez. Since you have focused on very relevant and important topics, and also for the application of the reform in Colombia. So I think that for a following event, we can just talk about this reform in detail. So we will pass the floor to Mr. Noé Valdivieso. And Noé Valdivieso has a master's degree in population studies from the Colegio de la Frontera Norte and is currently a doctoral candidate in the same discipline for the Colegio de Mexico. He is also a specialist in the United Nations systems in Mexico for advanced planning in the face of demographic changes. His interest focuses on socially and historically excluded populations with greater conditions of vulnerability, such as childhood, adolescents, older people, indigenous and Afro-descendant populations, as well as the LGBTQAI+ community. Thank you very much for your participation, Mr. Noé Valdivieso, and we will pass the floor for you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank to Mr. Emilio Carrasco Gonzalez, Director of CIESS, and also to the staff of this institution and for the invitation also to participate and comment, to provide comments on the challenges, the pension system in the long term, the short term. Thank you very much as well to Mr. Stefano Farnay and Miquel de Berni. For me, it's a pleasure to share this space with Mr. Jose Martinez, who also is commenting this documentation for the research. And thank you very much for all the guests in this session. After the comments of Mr. Martinez, I would like to mention on the strengthening of the discussion according to the research made on this documentation. So this topic should be considered very important currently because it seeks to be disruptive. So I'm referring to the demographic revolution, and in this case, it's a study in Colombia. The authors shares expertise based on a methodology and conceptual strategies and to see how these scope are changing the socioeconomical system in that country, but also they show certain elements that should be considered challenges and opportunities. The authors mentioned that the demographic revolution also based on the natural demographic, based on the control. And here I would like to mention that while I was reading, the authors made some reflections on this topic. However, they also provided me certain anxiety because I have to consider just to make attention on these demographic problems or issues. So we have to focus on the relationship on the transition from the natural towards the control, and if these are similar to the autonomy. Talking about the fertility and the control of women from the body, this is an international goal already achieved by the international institutions. And of course, because we have distributed this into different ages, focus on youth people or women that we are focusing in this region. But also is to identify if these policies and actions are being considered of this autonomy control, and also to have the control in terms or based on the human rights policies. To know if the body of women are not just to comply with the demographic goals. Just to take their initial interventions, we can ask ourselves if we are understanding what are the actions needed to implement for those women that want to have 2 or more children. And of course, this might have a higher importance. Now, in terms of a methodological process, this is focused on the populational statistics based on different tendencies on the long term for natality and mortality. However, I will say that what they mentioned that all the resources used for this article are focused on the migration zero. So of course, we should ask ourselves on what are the possible changes on the estimations in face of the immigration, for example, in Colombia, Venezuela, and the previous years. Now, the other proposals of this study is that the revolution demographic is just to go towards a more younger people for the sustainability, economical sustainability of Colombia. And also this depends from the point of view in which we have, as the text mentioned, is just to expect a lower rate of informality, because of course the elderly rate will increase accordingly to their retirement process. And of course we should also consider the taxpayers in that age, which can be opportunities to mitigate different challenges. This research also emphasizes the public policies that should be addressed, the pension system, such as the economical growth, and the relationship between the demographic policies and socioeconomic policies to address the effects of the demographic revolution in the countries. Now, the critical analysis of this study in Colombia reveals both the significant strengths and the other areas that can benefit from other exploration and methodological precision, not only by the lack of rigorosity of the authors, but with the lack of information that we are presented for the demographic challenge. For example, for the implications on not addressing the demographic challenges that can be reflected selected as one of the priority topics, such as the care topic in our region. Mainly, if we just project the population rates to generate certain estimations on how or what would be the cost on non-investing on the different care systems or the pension systems in face of the feminization of the aging. And of course, the economical inequalities and gender inequalities that are being of importance of different countries. Now, in terms of the demographic phenomenon, can be provide a more contextualized process. So this can be benefits from greater exploration in how these specific rates can provide different information by the population rates or the differences in the regions based on the different economical opportunities or the basic opportunities, because we all know that the transitions of this type are not homogeneous within the different populations that are vulnerable. And also this study can also includes what are the main social and cultural causes and economical effects of this demographic revolution, especially based on the gender equity, education and care, and labor participation. This perspective can provide recommendations on how the public policies can be designed to mitigate inequalities. For example, in the Colombian change or case, this process can provide significant success outcome from the economic to the social fields. Now, the authors contribute significantly to the knowledge on the demographic changes by providing information on specific tendencies in the transition in Colombia, by identifying the 3 stages on the structure based on the age of population. This study provides a clear knowledge on how these changes are providing the changes of the country. This is important not only to understand the dynamics in Colombia, but also to prepare a sheet or just to prepare a route for the national location. With the help of other Latin American countries, we can just support this study, such as Brazil, Mexico. They have experienced demographic transitions, but with differences in terms of rhythm and socioeconomical impact. However, also of the country clusters such as Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay, which transition is towards an aging populations in aging population. Now, I will provide you certain recommendations on this information because we all know that there might be different methodologies due to or just to update due to the different prospects data in 2024, but also to amplify the impact of this paper that can provide information as orientation document for the preparation of different policies, because not only the stakeholders will be part of this education perspective. Now, how to be part of the key aspects from the business vision. And of course, different people are contributing year by year, and the contributions that they provide by each of the companies and they are addressed for this kind of population may result on increase on their companies according to the percentage of all elderly people from 2050 to 2070. And this vision take aside the other population because they have to prepare planning and business unions to change good practices, but also just to prepare models of employability to reduce the gaps and to promote equality from the young people to the elder people. Okay, let me just just provide you with the final remarks. However, one of the countries that have been transferred, just changed from the phase, the transition demographic revolution, have used the migration as key element due to the lower rates of fertility and also due to the life expectancy. For the Colombian scenario, we all share this also, because this is a topic that we should consider within the structure in the age and sex differences between the populations towards the opportunities on the labor market, because the different contexts, we have different opportunities in this sector. Now, the authors present evidence on the creation of economical opportunities because these have a crucial role on the employability between generations. Also, by implementing initiatives with corporate initiatives that can support community projects to improve the life conditions of people. And this also foments or promotes the use of technology for sustainable process with the population by using key actors, also by the support by different civil unions or different companies. Now, the demographic changes are the motor of a change of socioeconomical progress. And let's recall that the demographic revolution means population. And of course, this can contribute to the differences numbers that have been provided in this study. So we should leverage the emergent opportunities. Not only should we have to change the public policies, but also to empower the communities so they can prepare or have an active role in their future. Thank you very much I only want to mention for the users that join us today because the message provided by the author is a key. To use this for the long term and short term is crucial for the population to create public policies, and also it's useful for the academics or for the business users to promote inclusion, to reduce gender inequalities and socioeconomical biases or gaps. And of course, this is something that we should review nowadays. Each decision or each policy that will be implemented should be guided on the objective to create more equitable and justice populations. So that is why I just call for action for everyone, so we can leverage this opportunity to act now because our future starts now. Thank you very much, Mr. Valdivieso, for your intervention. And I think that we don't have to forget our objective, and our works should be contributory with more equity. So let's continue with the answers. So I will just ask a couple of questions to Mr. Bruni from Ecuador. Mr. Bruni, could you please help us out with analysis of Ecuador with all countries in blue, specifically based on Colombia countries? And Mr. Bruni, this is the second question from Alejandro from Colombia. Days ago, we have already mentioned that the Colombian rate for population has diminished. So we will pass the floor to Mr. Bruni.
I'm not sure I got all the questions correctly. First, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
First, I would like to thank the contribution from the commentators of the paper. They are very complex and complicated, and I will read them carefully if you send them to me in order to take them into consideration in correct.
Leo las dos preguntas para efectos de la traducción. Desde Ecuador, la primera pregunta es, por favor, ¿me podría ayudar con un
First
análisis
question
para
from Ecuador is, could you help me for an analysis for Ecuador? It's a country in blue, which is different from Colombia. And the second question, also for Professor Bruni, is from Colombia. A little ago was noticed that the Colombian birth rate was negative recently. How does that affect the results?
The answer are very simple somehow. It's just the history of the countries are different. I mean, the behavior of the demographic tendencies must be studied itself. I have not studied specifically Ecuador, and I cannot answer this. I concentrate myself on the data on Ecuador. Sorry, I would be happy to do that, but I cannot answer immediately now. What happens with the decline in population? Well, you see, the basic goal of this paper is very simple somehow. It is to try to connect two disciplines which have never been really connected, demography and economics. We do not have a clear connection between these two theories. On one side, we have demography, which is mainly a descriptive kind of disciplines. So no models, just description and forecast based on basically on mechanical tools. And on the other, we have the economics, which provides a lot of models, but many of them do not take into consideration demography. So the main idea here is just to try to put together these two elements to show how important is demography to understand demographic economic trends, and especially labor market trends. And the other, to understand that demographic trends together with economic trends determine migration, which in their turn determine economics. So this is why all the paper adopts the scenario with zero migration. There is a very nice slide, I don't know if I can show it to you, to show why I think it is very important to use migration, to use economic models for migration. Okay, this is the forecast. This is 2022 United Nations forecast for migration. Is it thinkable? Is this believable? It is acceptable that the trend in migration registered up to now will abruptly change and go down? We need economics to understand migration. We cannot do that. I believe that the United Nations should not even try to do this kind of stuff. It does not make any sense. So one of the basic efforts here was just to try to link demographic trends with the labor market, with migration, and then go back to demography. The second is to give again importance to demographic trends. Demography was very, very important in the second half of the 20th century. There was a big discussion, the so-called Great Demographic Debate, but the conference in Cairo canceled everything. And after that, after 1994, very little has been written of the relationship between economics and demography. And I think this is just an effort to try to take again demography into consideration. The important things are not a single element. The important thing is to show that there exists this relationship. I would let Stefano discuss about pension. I just would like to say that in this kind of situation, we cannot say what is good for the next 20 years or 30 years. I think the situation must be monitored continuously. We should be flexible, adopting the policies necessary given the trends in economics and demography taken together. Thank you.
Voy a repetir la segunda pregunta para el profesor Bruni.
Sí.
I'm going to repeat the second question.
I'm not sure I got it. Can I have it in English? Sorry.
I'm going to repeat the second question. A few days ago, it was reported that the population in Colombia started having a negative rate. Does that change the challenges?
If the working age population will start to decline, sooner or later, unless there is an economic crisis, Colombia will need migrants. I've shown here, but probably you have a picture here. No, it's not this one. All the countries, all the G7 countries, have entered a situation in which working age population declines. They entered this situation in the last 30, 35 years. The result is that from 1990 to 2022, they received 72 million migrants, despite the fact that almost all of them acted against migration. So this was not something they wanted. This is something they had to accept. The same thing is very important to understand for Colombia. I believe that if the rate of growth of employment continues like that, in around 15 years, Colombia will need migrants. So this will then, at that moment, we see what are the implications for that. Certainly, migration will reduce, will increase working age population, will decrease the pressure on the labor market, will increase the number of people that can pay for the pension of the other system, will reduce the average age of the population. But as I say, you cannot decide now. So this is why you cannot decide now. COVID was not forecast. Venezuelan immigrants were not seen before. So I think the main suggestion is that, taking all the policies suggested by Stefano, the government should be ready to adopt them according to the needs that will become evident in the next 20, 30, 40 years. So if the population decline, this will imply migration. And then the problem is, will the country adopt an policy for migration or a stupid attitude like the one followed by EU countries or the United States or Japan? That's a big question.
Muchas gracias, profesor Bruni. Vamos a proceder con dos
Thank you, Professor
preguntas.
Bruni. We're going to move on with some questions for Professor Farni.
Probablemente el apoyo a nuestro comentarista, el doctor Martínez.
We need the support of our commentator, Dr. Martinez, for the case of Mexico. The first question comes from Colombia, Alberto Vargas. Can you qualify? Can you spell the recent reforms in the system of Colombia? And the other one is, if you see an increase in absolute numbers and negatives in population over 60, what happened with the resources of the people with their working life?
Bueno, aquí voy. Bueno, me imagino que calificar la reciente reforma es
I think
explicar un
that
poco
assessing the new
cómo
reform
funciona.
is to explain a little how it's working.
Yo, a ver, yo diría que, a ver, esta reforma ha hecho un par de cosas buenas.
This reform has a couple of good
En primer
things.
lugar,
In the first place,
sistema de pilares ha
something
reducido
pillar system
los beneficios que se estaban entregando a las
have reduced the
personas
benefits given to
de mayores
people
ingresos en el régimen,
with higher
régimen
income in the
Esto,
distribution
entre otras cosas, implica
system.
que la cifra que presentó el doctor Martínez
This
de la
implies that
OECD,
the numbers that the OECD
Colombia ya
presented
va a disminuir
is going to decrease the replacement rate. It's not going to be the highest between the members of the organization.
La otra cosa que hizo fue
The
que
other thing
obligó a las personas que no lograban
is that
cumplir
it
con
forced
las,
people who did
con
not
los requisitos para
have
pensionarse,
the requirements to
los
retire.
obligó a tomar una renta vitalicia.
It made them have a
En Colombia,
permanent,
hasta hoy,
lifelong
la reforma
stipend,
pensional empieza a entrar en vigencia en un año.
because this is going
Si
to
yo no
be
alcanzo los requisitos
bigger within a
para
year.
pensionarme, me
If
devuelven
I
mi
don't have those requirements, they give my money back.
y la gente por lo general recibe la plata y se la gasta y no la
People usually get their
invierte en
money,
cosas
they
para
spend it, and then don't invest and to
Entonces, lo
keep
que hace
that income.
la reforma es
So what the
obligar
reform does is
a
that
las personas
it's forcing people who have contributed at least
a
300
tomar una
weeks
renta vitalicia. Entre otras
to
cosas, se le dan
take on
más
a
subsidios,
lifelong
esperando que esto
in-
pueda
grant.
contribuir a tener una renta vitalicia,
And this allows them to have this
un poco
lifelong
más alta. Un poco más alta. ¿Sí?
income to and be
Y por
higher.
otro lado, lo que ha hecho es
And
que
on the
ha
other hand,
ampliado enormemente
it has
las
also
personas que reciben una pensión asistencial.
amplified that the people who receive an assistance pension.
Pasamos de, pues la previsión es pasar de 1.600.000
The provision is to go from
beneficiarios a 2.800.000
1,300,000 to
y el subsidio que se le va a entregar
1,200,000.
va a pasar de 80.000 pesos a 223.000 pesos
The thing is to
mensuales.
move on
De
from
manera que
80,000 to
otra vez, tal vez Colombia
223,000
se
a
va a
month.
mover también
So
al
again,
último puesto de las
Colombia
pensiones asistenciales y vamos a
is going
escalar.
to move on and
En el medio
escalate
de
a little.
esto, hay muchos otros cambios que se
Among other
introducen que
changes
son,
that were
son
introduced
interesantes, ¿sí? Pero
that are
lo que
interesting.
resalta es que para una serie de
What
colectivos
stands out is
se
for
están rebajando las condiciones
collective is to
para poder pensionar.
change conditions for retirement.
Fundamentalmente el número de años que deben cotizar. Entonces, si
For
uno
example, if the number of
poco
years
todo,
of contributions go down,
sí, claro, se va a aumentar la cobertura de
coverage
las
is going to
personas,
increase.
la cobertura económica, ¿sí? Porque no todas van a ser pensiones en el sentido
For people,
estricto,
because
¿sí?
not all of them are going to be pensions, or at least in the way Colombia sees it. They are going to be receiving a lifelong income, but the number of people is going to go up who receive this, and the amount that they are going to receive. The people that need help to help their income to have a lifelong
en muchos
grant.
casos, los requisitos para acceder a una
In many
pensión
cases, the
hay que
requirements
financiarlo.
change, and that has to be subsidized.
Y esto es el grave problema. Ahora,
And that's a main issue.
Otra vez nos debemos hacer a las proyecciones poblacionales, es decir, a las
Again, we need to see this
las
population projections, which is again demography. The monthly, even the monthly projections
La cosa podía funcionar de aquí a 40 años.
we could think that this could work from here to 40 years and then just
con la nueva cifra que están
go
saliendo,
off. But with these new figures,
al parecer nos vamos a anticipar bastante en
apparently
el
we're
tiempo.
going to anticipate
Igual
for quite some time.
Unos ajustes adicionales que deben ser
She needs
tomados
some
lo más
adjustments
pronto posible.
that need to be
De manera que calificar la reforma
implemented as
es,
soon as possible. So
bueno,
qualifying this
bastante
reform,
difícil en pocos minutos. Hay aspectos positivos sobre los cuales nadie discute. ¿Sí? Es
there
bueno
are
dar
good points
a
that
quien no
are
tiene
not
nada
for
algo de
discussion.
dinero para que
To give people who have
en su vejez,
nothing so they can
pero,
survive during their old
¿cómo lo
age.
vamos a financiar?
But how are you
Hasta
going
ahora
to
la
finance
demografía
this?
dice que
So far,
tenemos
demography says
pero es que las
that we still
decisiones
have some
en materia de
room,
pensiones deben ser tomadas con mucha
but
antelación porque
the
las
matter
decisiones
of
que
pensions
tomo
need
ahora
to
tendrá
really be
efectos
seen
en 30,
with a lot of
40 años.
anticipation because it's going to have an effect in
Hay que
30 or
pensar.
40 years.
Hay que pensar en esto.
We need to think about this. I would like to close this talking about the reform.
También hablando de la sugerencia que hizo el doctor Martínez al gobierno
About the
colombiano,
suggestion
en realidad el gobierno
of
colombiano
Dr.
ha
Martinez's
decidido
suggestion.
hacer todo lo contrario.
The
En el
Colombian
sentido
government has
que-
actually went the other way and done the opposite.
Sobreimpuesto a los trabajadores, las
But
contribuciones
the overtaxation to workers
con la reforma pensional.
increase the
Bueno, hay una
reforms
pregunta
to
sobre
pensions.
México. Yo
There's a
quiero
question
tener
about
algún
Mexico.
día de poder ir a México para estudiar la
I
situación
hope
de
I
allá.
can go to Mexico one day and
Desafortunadamente
study their situation.
No lo puedo hacer. De
Unfortunately, I
manera
can
que
do that
de
from here.
pronto el doctor Martínez y como Emilio, tú sugeriste, me puede
Dr. Martinez and
colaborar.
Emilio, you may help me.
Perfecto, sí. Creo que la colaboración a la que hace referencia
Yes,
Estefano es
I
en
think
la,
what he means
la
is
respuesta
in the answer.
y de pronto la conferencia y el CIESS te puede colaborar en la
And
otra
then
expectativa tuya.
CIESS can
Estamos
help you out
empezando
with
a
the other
trabajar
expectation.
en un programa que
We are
sea
working on a
intercambios y
program
pasantías de
about
especialistas que
internships and
a Ciudad de México. Creo que es
exchange
parte de la
for
labor
experts to come here
de la
to Mexico,
conferencia y
which
la
is
integrar
part of the
dentro de
work
los
of the
programas que realiza.
conference
Entonces, le paso
to integrate.
la pregunta al doctor Martínez respecto de, y la
So let's
repito
move on
para
to
todos
Dr.
ustedes,
Martinez.
si bien en la actualidad se observa un incremento en números absolutos y relativos de la
So
población de
if
más
there
de
is an
60 años y
increase
más, ¿qué
in
pasa
the
con los
population
recursos
of
generados por las
older
personas
than
mayores durante
60,
su edad laboral?
what happens to the resources to the people who
Bueno,
were when they were in
para
working
una persona
age?
que tenga 60, 70
In
años,
Mexico, for someone to be 60 or
todas las
70,
contribuciones de antes de 1997,
all the
pues realmente no
contributions
hay
before
nada, ¿no? De ahorro.
1997, there
Actualmente
really
el
wasn't
gobierno federal
any
paga
savings.
aproximadamente 2
Currently,
billones de pesos en
the
pensiones,
government pays
que son como
2,000 million
120
in
mil millones de
pensions,
dólares. Todo ese dinero
which is around
está en el gasto público, no casi
$800
ahorro.
million.
Ahora, de las contribuciones después de 97
About the contributions after
están en las
1997,
administradores de fondos para el retiro. Yo calculo que
it's
una
in the
persona que haya contribuido
retirement
continuamente,
funds.
¿sí? De
Someone who
97 hasta hoy, que
contributed
tenga 60 años,
continuously from 1997 up to now,
debe tener como
and this is around 60,
no sé, 2 millones ahorrados en su
they
cuenta.
must have around 2 million in their individual accounts,
$110,000, $120,000. Y
which
una
is around
persona de bajos salarios que haya cotizado a nivel
$120,000 for someone with low
digamos,
wages
de
who
20
contributed
o 30% de la cotización
around
máxima,
20 or
va a
30% of the
tener
maximum
como
contribution, going to have
300 o
around
400,000 pesos.
300 or 400,000 pesos,
$20,000, $25,000, ¿no? O sea, ese
$25,000.
está ahí, bueno, pues se usará para
That
pagar
money is
pensiones.
there
Y en
and it's
términos
going to be
de
used
dónde
to
está el
pay
dinero, pues está
pensions.
ahí, ¿no? Las pensiones.
And
El
the
gobierno va a
money is
seguir
there.
pagando
The government is going to
2 billones
continue
de pesos de
paying
pensiones, que va a
those
crecer seguramente en el tiempo.
2 billion
Y
pesos
a
that
largo
it's going to
plazo, pues,
increase.
el ahorro en las AFORES va a ir
In the long
contribuyendo a
term,
eso.
the individual savings is going to contribute to that.
A continuación, veo Nicolás Stark desde Chile.
So Nicolás,
Primero,
start from Chile.
Felicitaciones por las buenas posiciones y comentarios.
Congratulations for the good
Segundo,
and
sacar
the
de la
comments.
discusión política la muy poca popular
How
política
to take out of
relacionada con
the
el aumento de las edades de jubilación por la vejez. En
how
Chile
to
tenemos
take this
edad de
out of the
60
politics,
para
the
mujeres y
increase of
65
age for
para varones,
retirement. In Chile, we are
al menos en
75,
los años 70 o antes, y siempre y cuando
66 for,
comienza
for women
a
and 65
proponerse,
for men.
sale la política de corto plazo y no se avanza.
Whenever we
Incluso es
move
un
on,
tema
there
para
is
que el
a
CIESS y la
short
CIS
term
puedan elaborar alguna propuesta
plan that it
técnica
does not
que
move
ayude a
on.
los
So
países
the
que
CIESS
sufren este
might
problema.
make
Voy a
suggestions
hacer
for
antes de pasar
countries who
la pregunta a
suffer from
los
this same issue.
nuestros expositores.
Before moving on,
En
I
el,
would
en
like to
el
comment
reciente
something.
trabajo que hemos hecho para Colombia, una de las
In a
cosas que hemos
recent
considerado
paper we
es
have been
que
doing
el
for
debate
Colombia, something that
político
has been considered is that the
que se
political
suscita
debate
en
that
torno a
arises,
reformas de tipo paramétrico, ¿sí? Es
particularly on
muy
reforms
complejo
for Mexico, is really
porque
complicated
tiene unos efectos en la situación política del país muy difíciles
because the
y
situation in the
hay
country
países que han
is
adoptado
very
dentro de sus
difficult.
sistemas
And there are countries who
mecanismos de
have
ajuste
adopted
vía técnico y automático
mechanisms
que no se
that
someten a
adjust
discusión política,
automatic, that they are not
solamente que
subject
han sido
to
adoptados a partir de un
political
pacto
discussion.
social
They
donde
have just
todas
been
las
adopted
partes
by a
convienen
social pact
efectivamente
that it's
los
convenient for all
convenios de nuestros
parties.
países, no solamente
And we have seen
americanos,
this not just in
Europa,
America,
pues es un tema
but
complejo.
Europe,
Pero
because
entonces
it's a complicated topic.
de la pregunta a los expositores,
So this
reiterando
question goes
en el
to
caso
our
del sector
lecturers.
interamericano, pues hemos hecho
And here,
algo en ese sentido,
the-
tomando nota en el reciente trabajo que estamos entregando
yes, we have
para
done a
Comisión
recent
de
note that we
Desarrollo de la
are
Seguridad Social
handling
que
for
nos
social
permite un
security
trabajo que
development.
hemos denominado de un sistema de pensiones a un
We
sistema de
have
protección
developed a
para los adultos.
comprehensive
Adelante, Estefano,
system, a
profesor.
pension system for adults.
Sí,
So please go ahead.
me permite, empezaría, antes que nada, saludando a Nicolás,
I will start
que muy
first
amablemente
greeting.
me recibió y conocí
Thank you for having me. I
en uno de mis viajes a Chile.
had the
Entonces,
opportunity to
muchas
get to know him when I went to
cordial
Chile.
saludo y gracias por la pregunta.
Thanks for that
Esto
question.
es de verdad muy complicado.
This is really complicated.
Yo creo que el tema de la edad tiene un componente político muy
I think that
complicado.
age is a very complicated
Que
element
sin
regarding
los
politics
los técnicos no logramos resolver.
because we have not been able to solve it.
Sí, y ahora, yo creo que en Colombia el problema de la edad es un problema aún
In
más
Colombia,
complicado
aging is a
porque
particular
hay otras
problem
barreras de carácter político
because there are other
que
political
hacen que el
barriers
sistema pensional
that make
sea
the
más
pension
enredoso.
system
¿A qué me
to be
refiero?
more troublesome.
A que otra vez vuelvo a la tasa de reemplazo.
Again, is the
El problema
replacement
de la
rate.
la tasa de reemplazo de la OECD en realidad no
The
sé
OECD
exactamente a
replacement
qué se
rate.
está refiriendo.
I don't know what they mean.
Porque hay una tasa de reemplazo ahora
Is there a
en los fondos de
replacement rate
pensiones
in
privados que
pension
es
funds
muchísimo más
that are
bajo. En
private
términos,
that is
a grandes
considerably
rasgos es la
lower?
mitad.
It's
Y
roughly
al
half
interior
of
del
it.
sistema público de reparto,
Within the
la tasa de
distribution
reemplazo
public
varía
system,
muchísimo. Para la
the
persona,
replacement rate
para
changes
las
a lot.
personas que ganan un salario mínimo, que
For
entre
people
otras cosas
who
son la
make the minimum
mayoría de las
wage,
personas
which is most of the people
en este país, ¿sí? Alrededor
here,
de un 60%, la
around
tasa de
60%,
reemplazo es del
the replacement
100%.
rate is 100%.
Uno cotiza sobre un salario mínimo y le van a dar una pensión
You
de un
contribute
salario
over a minimum wage and
Y
you
esto yo
get
creo que es
a
algo
pension
que
of minimum wage.
definitivamente no logramos modificar. Es
This
decir,
is
esto
something that we
es una
cannot,
línea roja
have
de la
not been able to
política
modify.
que no podemos modificar.
This is something
Ajuste entonces
regarding
hay que
politics that we
hacerlo por
cannot
otro
change.
lado.
The adjustment needs to
La
be
edad
done through somewhere else. Increase the age. Because not only because it is a need for everybody, but it would allow the replacement rate of 100% to decrease. The replacement rate depends. But if it's a minimum wage, it's 100%, and they do not believe me.
Entonces, la edad se vuelve, sobre todo en Colombia,
so age, particularly in Colombia, it becomes a very significant variable in the system.
No aumentarla, a pesar de
government
que
decided not to increase it, despite the recommendation of the specialist was to raise it. But it's a good step.
La entidad que maneja el sistema público,
because the entity that manages the public system, it's to think that within 5 years, it had to be considered to increase retirement age. We would not understand why it wasn't done now and why it was done gradually. And the Ministry of Work has been more considerate and to think that between 10 and 15 years it should be done. But the specialists agree that the retirement age should increase in Colombia. Also the years. This is something that I consider should be also done in Chile. Have a very a red line that stops that of politics that stops from adopting this measure. But this has created a gap, and at least they recognize that the retirement age should be increased. Let's see if in 5 years we have this government and it's going to actually increase retirement age. Thank you. I would also like to address this question to Professor Bruni. If he can tell us something about European systems that have been handling this condition.
¿Cómo sacar de la discusión política la muy poco popular relacionada con el aumento de las edades de jubilación por vejez?
Related to the increase of retirement age, and they refer to the case of Chile, where the retirement age is 60 for women, 65 for men, and whenever they talk about increasing it, it's a short-term changing politics, and that's where it changes. So please, Professor Bruni.
I don't have enough knowledge of the South American situation to express opinion on this kind of problem. What I can recall is that Europe is characterized by a very different situation. For instance, in Italy, the retirement age is linked to life expectation. So automatically, the retirement age will increase with the increase in life expectancy. At the same time, this is happening in many other European countries. But then you have the case of France. And as you know, there have been a really political rise to stop the increase in retirement age. And in fact, the first thing which was said by the left-wing party after the results of the election was to bring back retirement age to 60 years old. So, you know, Europe has different situation which go from the France case, where the political division is very strong. On one side, the left wing, which want to reduce retirement age, and the other parties who are in favor of raising retirement age. In Italy, we have chosen a middle way, where there is a link between retirement age and life expectancy. which I'm not so sure. I'm not really an expert on pension, but I think it happens almost automatically every 2 years. Can I have the translation in English? I don't know how to get it because I'm not sure I follow everything.
Muchas gracias, profesor Bruni.
Yo
Professor
puedo
Bruni,
complementar la
Sí, por favor.
respuesta.
can I contribute to that?
Primero que todo, en Europa,
First of all, in
la edad de
Europe,
jubilación, decimos así, legales son relativamente altas, pero hay la
the
posibilidad
retirement age in
de
Europe are
pensionarse
relatively
antes.
high, but there's a possibility to
Claro,
retire
uno
sooner.
paga con una pensión más baja.
Of course, you receive a
Sí,
lower
cosa
pension,
que, por ejemplo, por estos lados no es posible, ¿sí?
which is
Entonces, hay una
here is
diferencia
not
entre
possible.
la edad estatutaria de jubilación y
There is a
la
difference
edad
between the
efectiva que la gente se va a jubilar.
statutory age for retirement and the
La tendencia es clara,
age
¿sí?
of people, but the
Ambas van
tendency is
hacia arriba.
clear. They both
Ambas
are
van
going up. They both are
La otra
increasing.
cosa son los ajustes automáticos.
The other thing is about the automatic adjustments.
Pero,
They said in Italy,
sido debatido.
this has been subject to debate
pero
and it has been
también
approved,
después ha sido muy criticado.
but then it has also received criticism.
Una publicación de la OECD, ¿sí? Pension at a Glance,
There is an
de hace un
OECD
par de años,
publication
donde efectivamente se muestra que los países que han adoptado
where it
regla
clearly shows that
automática de aumento
the countries that have
de la
done
edad
the
de retiro,
automatic adjustment
están
of retirement
pensando como
age
de echarse para atrás.
are considering taking
Por
that
otra
policy
vez,
back
los efectos sociales que esto
because of
pueden
the
tener,
social
¿sí?
effect that this may have.
De manera que sí existen en países, sobre todo europeos, que yo sepa,
There are
¿sí?
countries,
Pero son
particularly in
bastante
Europe,
aprobados, pero son bastante controvertidos, ¿sí? Y el
that are
ejemplo
very
que hizo
controversial,
pues, del
like
gobierno
the example of
francés, pues,
Michele of the
también es un
French
ejemplo
government
sobre esto.
is proof of this.
Una
Thank you.
pregunta le traslado para el profesor Kelly. ¿Cuáles pueden ser las recomendaciones
Which can be the
estratégicas
recommendation
laborales
in
para
the
poder
strategies
para
of
poder
work
mejorar
policies
el sistema de seguridad social?
to improve a social security system?
I think Stefano already suggested this very clearly. There is the use of this index of dependency, of economic index of dependency, clearly shows that the problem of pension would be reduced if employment level is increased. Now, this is in Europe a big problem in the sense that everybody wants to increase employment. At the same time, we are faced by the lack of manpower. So what is the point? I believe that from now on, as has been also suggested also by the discussion before, we have to think together economic policy and demographic policies. I give you a simple example. Italy, in this moment, is benefiting from the possibility to make huge infrastructural investments. These huge infrastructural investments, for instance, we are planning to build a bridge between mainland and Sicily, right? Now, the politicians who are in favor of this kind of policies seems to totally ignore the fact that the more we invest in infrastructures, the bigger will be our need of immigrants. So on one side, you see here, you see the lack of understanding of the relationship between demography, labor market, and economics. In a situation of Europe, of all Europe, the increase in employment, which would be a good element to reduce the problem of paying the pension, is in contrast with the willingness to ignore the fact that we miss labor force. So this is evidence that we should link directly investment policies with migration policies and act in such a way that these two things go together. This is, I believe, is the basic point. The basic point of all this kind of studies, a strong link between labor market, demography, and economic policies in all aspects of the labor market. I don't know if Stefano has something to add on this, but...
No.
Muchas gracias, profesor Bruni. Nos pregunta Luis Alfredo.
Thank you, Professor Bruni. We have another question. Do you think it's important to increase retirement age, but to extend the working life in Latin America is different from the reality in Latin America and in Europe? And this has to do with economy and development of countries. And that really complicates this decision. Plus, the changing technologies, they require a lot of training for the elderly to remain in the workforce. In that sense, what are the policies that countries should adopt to extend the working life of the elderly?
My way of reasoning is that I really would refuse to work on generalities. I'm sorry, but I don't know enough to answer a question like this. I would say something, but I can say something, but I think it would be correct to acknowledge ignorance and say, well, I would need to study this problem before providing generals. So I don't know enough. I mean, my point is we need more numbers, we need more statistics, and especially we need better methodologies to analyze the data. For instance, for what relates to the labor market, I strongly believe that the standard methods, the standard models used to analyze the labor market are not sufficient to understand the problem because they do not allow linking labor market with demography. So for instance, in this case, we need stock flow models which will supplement the analysis of labor market in such a way to create a link with demographic trends. Generally speaking, I would not make a specific answer to this. I would say, let me study it with the proper methodology, and then we should try to reach answer to the problems.
Estefano, no sé si quieras agregar algo.
Sí, bueno, para extender la vida laboral.
Stefano, I don't know if you'd like to answer that.
Sobre todo en los países desarrollados, ¿sí? Lo que se propone como primera medida es reducir la presión tributaria
For the developed countries, we tend to reduce the contributory process on the population or the people that have already a pension, but they want to continue working. Actually, I don't know. I don't have any knowledge of Latin American contributory systems. However, in Colombia, this cannot be adopted. This is not a policy because the pensions are not taxable. However, in the developed countries, many pensioners pay, such as the other people. So the main objective here is just to reduce taxes to the profitability that they have to pay. So we can just make that a part of the income while they are working are not being considered. Just because they have to receive a lower payment for the pension. So actually, these are measures, easy measures to be adopted. However, the problem here to address is how can we change thoughts or the way of thinking of people towards the elderly population. Of course, we still have to do more.
Sí, eso no es un problema solamente de América
This
Latina.
is not only a Latin America
El
problem.
problema es que
However,
muchos
the main
empresarios
problem is
quieren
that many
que el
business
adulto
people
mayor
think that the
produzca
elderly
mejor.
people have not enough
Muchas veces porque tienen
skills
parámetros de
versus
productividad
young people.
que no sé si son los correctos, porque la
So
productividad deriva también de
actually,
la
the
experiencia.
productivity depends on
La
experience,
productividad deriva también
or
de la
productivity
capacidad de
depends on the
resolver,
capacities to address things,
problemas,
or just to address the
de no ser
problems,
conflictivos,
not
de
to have
tener
conflict,
una disciplina
on having
una
a
disciplina en el
discipline
trabajo.
on the work environment.
Probablemente los adultos mayores como nosotros sí
So
tenemos
probably the
dificultades
elderly
con la
people
inteligencia
have
artificial
an
y
artificial
adaptarse
intelligence
muy
issues
rápidamente a la
management
inteligencia
because they
artificial.
cannot be
Pero por eso
adaptive, or they
también
cannot even adapt themselves to this kind of technologies.
de
However, we should
ayuda
start thinking on a support
a los
system
adultos mayores,
or a system
de
that can support to the
formación
elderly
que los
people
ayuda,
to train them or just to
los
educate
ayuda
them on this,
ponerse al día con la nueva
and also
tecnología.
just to
Así como,
continue
así como
working
los
on the
jóvenes.
updating on
Los
the
jóvenes
tools,
salen
such as the young people,
del
because if
sistema
young
educativo
people
y no tienen
are part of the educational system, but
conocimiento,
sometimes they don't have enough experience or knowledge.
Los programas de capacitación
So the
ayudan
training
en inserción
programs
laboral, ¿sí?
can
O una
help them
capacitación
out
que esté
for
al
the labor
interior de la
insertion or
empresa.
incorporation
Entonces,
within the
jóvenes
company.
capacite
So of course, there might
a la
be
persona adulta
people that
mayor
can train
en
the
tema de
elderly people
tecnología, de
on
procesos,
technology,
y la persona adulta mayor
and the elderly or the
capacite
old
al
people
joven en
can
temas de
train the
experiencia.
young people
Pero estas
in
son
terms of
cosas que
experience.
todavía son
So,
un poco
however, there are
difíciles de
some things that
implementar.
we still
Hay que cambiar el
making
chip
progress
de
on.
la gente,
So we
o
should think, we should change the way of thinking of people.
am, y yo creo que lo vamos a hacer.
So I think that we will do it.
Entonces hay que pensar
So we
hacia
should
dónde
keep
vamos. Hay que pensar
thinking
que
about our
nosotros
future, and to think that the elderly people not necessarily are less productive.
la
So we
parte de
should
su
value
producción que
their
es productiva
production
y
because it's
poder
productive.
darle elementos
So we
para
should
poder
provide them with elements
desarrollar
to
sus
develop
capacidades,
themselves
sus
and their
capacidades.
skills and their productivity.
Y yo creo que en este campo todavía falta mucho.
And I think so we
Pero yo
still
creo
to
que
do many
hacia
things here.
allá
However,
vamos a ir y debemos ir.
so we should
If
go
I can
there,
say
and we
something,
should keep
can I add
working
something?
there.
There's
Can I say something?
What Stefano is saying is very advanced. In my country, we still have the opposite problem. We still think that having people retired early helps young people to get a job. Now, this is total lack of demographic understanding. We need more people to work. But all our system is built in such a way as to discourage all people from work. For instance, as a past economic professor, university professor, if I work for the state, I have to work for free. If I try to do other jobs, my taxation is very high. So all the system is built to discourage all people to work in order to facilitate young people to work, without understanding that, in fact, we miss people working, both young and elderly. So that's why, for instance, clear understanding of demographic trends is very important when you design economic policies.
Muchas gracias. Le cedo la palabra al maestro Valdivieso, que quiere hacer un comentario al respecto respecto de esta pregunta.
Thank you very much. I will pass the floor to Mr. Valdivieso.
En resonancia con lo que ya nos han compartido
Yes,
los
just to
autores,
add up to your
justo
comments,
One of
the most important challenges to prepare policies, programs, or take actions has to do with the perception changes that we all have as societies, or how we understand for the young people, for the elderly people. So we require just to make another definition or to provide another definition from the elderly people. So in this sense, we are being pragmatic in terms of training. However, I consider that this topic is very important. So we can just manage this based on a policy by the government that can include this non-discrimination per age, in which we can include empowerment of the elderly people. And mainly because they can have this key role within the community, because their participation is not only to receive, but also they can provide specifically different training. So we can just base the employability model that can include the intergenerational approach, and also including different models such as the mentorship, in which the old people or the seniors have these different mechanisms to provide training to the young people, as Stefana mentioned, such as the knowledge or experience. And also, how can we just share together this training or this experience between generations to have a easier transition and not just to separate the generations? And also, in terms of the private sector companies, should be included, but also the public companies. For example, in the oil sector, we all know that we have a generational replacement that is very complex and requires a specialist or experts on these topics. And also, we can say, or we can see that there are lower people that can be introduced to this kind of market. So of course, we should focus on the human rights, especially in the culture and perception changes that we have for these life stages and the knowledge that the society may have. Okay, we have another questions. Luis Alberto Quintana says, "Good afternoon, congratulations for your presentation. Okay, but based on certain measures, I understand that in France, Mr. Macron tried to implement retirement policies. So what do you think? So based on different scenarios, would you think that Latin America can maximize the levels of corruption, or do you think that the levels of corruption may increase?"
Let Stefano speak about this.
No, no, Emilio, esta es muy compleja.
Yes, actually, this is a very complex question.
¿Qué piensan los franceses?
So we might consider what the French people think.
Que un país,
because of course,
los franceses han enfrentado la caída de la
of course, French people have faced the birth rate, the birth rate that lower, and they are facing this kind of topics because they don't exactly know what is happening, because we don't live more. We not only live more, however, we live more with healthier conditions. So if we want to lower the age for retirement, of course, I don't agree.
Me resulta difícil entenderlo, si tengo que
So
decirlo.
I have some difficulties on understanding this, because I don't have an opinion up to this question. So let's continue to another question. It's very interesting what Mr. Farney mentioned of the reduction of the number of weeks so women can be retired. So what will be the long-term effects in this matter?
No, yo no estoy por nada favorable a que le hayan rebajado las
Yes,
semanas.
actually, I don't agree to reduce the weeks for women, because this is a discriminatory process against women in general. So I will say that we think to address a pension problem, which origin belongs to another market, which is the labor market.
Esto, decimos así, metodológicamente no es correcto.
So this is not that correct. So if I have a problem, because in the market labor, the women have a lower density of the contribution. Of course, I have to address this within the labor market. We don't have to address this into the pension system. So I think that this is a methodology or incorrect methodology. And of course, this is a discriminatory process against women. So if we lower the weeks or the years for contribution, of course, we have to evaluate, or just to evaluate how they will be the weeks of contribution between people, women and men. So of course, in this case, we are just considering that women are outside from the labor market, that they will are only considered to be the caregivers. So, for example, if the couple has a child, the one or the person that take care of that people or that child is a woman, and men also have to go out to work, and the men have only 20 years for the retirement, and women only has 16 years for retirement. So the answer is there. So we should be sensible for women, but at the end of the day, we are discriminating the participation of women within the labor market without considering that due to their lower contribution to the number of weeks, of course, they will get a lower pension. So I think that this is not a way just to address the problem of women. However, I think that we should address this as the European countries are addressing this. So women retired at the same age,
de importancia social.
And of course, they are caregivers, but also they have a very important social role for the care. And also they have to receive acknowledgement by the society, but this care should be considered for both women and men. However, they have to receive acknowledgement according to their role of care. So I think that the main solution or the correct solution is the one that European countries are applying. So to provide pension projects for children or pension projects for caregivers. So actually in Latin America, we are not rich countries as the European countries. So we should have patience on this progress and apply them. And of course, there are some other processes that are adequate. However, some of them are just. Yes, Mr. Bernie. Go ahead, Mr. Bernie.
Professor Bruni, su micrófono está cerrado.
You're muted, Mr. Bernie.
Yes, I just want to add that I totally agree with Stefano. Gender discrimination is a labor market problem, which is still very, very present also in European countries. Women women have a higher educational level, but they work in lower position, they receive lower wages. This is the problem to be solved. From this, then the pension system will become equitable again. But the problem is to be faced is in the labor market. Okay.
Muchas gracias, profesor Bruni. Hay varias preguntas que
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Bruni. There are some other questions that refer to the age. So let's just read them out, and just to conclude with one more question to Mr. Bernier and Mr. Forney. From Paola Gonzalez. Thank you very much for your interesting exposition. My question is, so is the immigration means just to increase the number of contributors? So what would be the main consequences for the national people?
None. I mean, what is the problem? The problem is not, the problem is to have immigration flows which are conducted in a rational and humane way. To do that, we need to have a good analysis of how many people we need, which kind of people we need, and to train them in the departure countries. We have the possibility not to following the analysis done by United Nations, but we have the possibility to forecast, to estimate how many people we need, with what educational level, and with what kind of competences. This is what we need to do. But the first difficult problem is a political problem, is the recognition that we need foreign labor. This is a problem of xenophobia. This is a problem that there is a position anti-migrants. So while we say that we don't have people enough, then we say this is a qualitative problem. No, it is a quantitative, huge problem. We have already imported 72 million people. We need a few 100,000. First of all, for instance, China. China is the country who will need more labor. This year, for the first time in its history, the working age population of the United States will decline. So, but the United States have a migration policies which is not based on labor market needs, but on families reunion. Europe doesn't want migrants, is fighting illegal migrants. But the best way to fight illegal migration is to have a correct policy for legal migrants, and so on and so on. So migration is, again, not a security problem, but is a labor market problem. This is the basic problem. We can analyze it in the context of the labor market, and then we can analyze this. Obviously, there are costs. This is evident, social cost, economic cost, but we are also facing huge costs. How much is Europe spending to prevent migrants to come to Europe? How much the United States are spending to prevent people they badly need to go to the United States? This is stupid, right? The stupidity is not to recognize the needs and not to act correctly, economically, morally correct to solve the problem. So this is the real problem of migration, a political problem for the moment.
Gracias. Estefano.
Bueno, yo añadiría simplemente que en el largo
Yes, Stefano.
plazo,
Yeah, I would like to mention that for the long term, I think that economists
las
are
migraciones
not doubted
ayudan,
that the immigrations are
sí
helpful,
tienen efecto negativo.
because of course they don't have a negative effect.
Sí. Pero como bien dijo Michele,
But
es
as
que
Michele mentioned
de
previously,
pronto estamos mirando en el corto plazo y
they
estamos
are
mirando
they are
muy
evaluating in
buena
the
parte los
long
costos,
term and also the
sin tener
cost
en
in the long
cuenta
term,
los
without
beneficios
considering the
que
benefits
derivamos
that
de la
the
migración,
benefits
¿sí?
from this.
Aquí en Colombia, pues vivimos los mismos
Here in
problemas
Colombia, for example, we live the same
probablemente
problems
hay en Europa.
as
Sin embargo,
in Europe may
mucho
probably
más,
have.
son mucho más abiertos. Yo creo que
Actually, here
Colombia es un
in
país
Colombia, we are an open-minded
ejemplo
country
mundial.
because Colombia is a
Tenemos
worldwide
mayor,
example
migrante y
to
muchos
receive migrants,
migrantes venezolanos.
because of
Sí,
course they
hay
receive many Venezuelan
mucha resistencia
migrants. However, there are a lot of
a
resistance
esta migración.
to
¿sí?
this immigration.
Resistencia porque empiezan a ver solamente los costos, ¿sí?
They resist to this because they only evaluate the
La
cost.
llegada de los venezolanos ha
And
hecho
of
que, por
course,
ejemplo, muchos
due to the
colegios
Venezuelans,
en Colombia no cerraran.
many college or many schools didn't close because there are no children. So the Venezuelan people or Venezuelan children are those that go to the schools, and there are different activities or professions that have been covered by Venezuelan people. However, Venezuelan people, they don't want to take care of what is happening in Europe. However, there are some other negative cases or instances, such as a subsidized, but we should evaluate this, or we should evaluate the complexity and also in the long term. So I think that this is a shared perception, because a profession won't have a negative effects in this regard.
There is a huge literature showing that the advantages of migrants far exceed the cost of migration. Let me give you a simple example. You have two countries, one which has sufficient young boys coming in and they pay for their education, and another country where you don't have young people, but you import migrants already educated. How much is the cost? How much is the saving of this country done? You know, a PhD costs about 300,000 euros, right? So when you import a PhD from another country, you save 300,000 euros at least. This cost show, for instance, England had huge advantages of importing migrants, and Italy is the same. Also, migrants are young, so they don't need much healthcare, and so on and so on. So there are a lot of studies showing that the advantages of migration, even in the short term, far exceed the cost of migration. The problem is political. The problem is the opposition to the diversity. That's the real problem, at least in Europe.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, ya para concluir, el Centro Interamericano de Estudios de Seguridad Social y la
All right, thank you very much, everyone. On behalf of the Inter-American Center for Social Security Studies, we thank your participation and the participation for all the users.
De igual manera, quiero agradecer muy especialmente.
And also, I want to thank you, Mr. Michele Berni and Stefano Forné, and of course to our commentors, Mr. Gabriel Martinez and Noé Valdivieso. And just to conclude, I would like to invite you to visit our webpage and just to review our academic programming, because we will have some other type of CIESS sessions that are very relevant for us and for all the Social Security institutions. Thank you very much, everyone, and hope we can join us today again in another session. Thank you very much and have a great day. Thank you very much, Mr. Bruni. You are very invited to be part of some other session.
Sí, ya me voy a inscribir, dime dónde.
Yes, I will be there.
Ya me voy a inscribir.
Yes, I will enroll. So just only let me know where. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.